Oh, hello there. It's your good friend Smiles. As Warbirds is tagged this age, I can do a little bit more during the age posting about my thoughts on the age, my wars, setups, things I see without being too at risk of, outing myself, as it were. So I'm gonna just go over this is the actual setup list I made for the kingdom. But this was before finals, so you may notice that our actual setup list is a little bit different. And what's not included here is I also had sort of a side list of these are nice provinces to have one or two of in every setup, and they included things like individual heretics or necromancers for magic ward or lightning strike, stuff like that. Or, sort of a one-off dwarf sage that might be good at doing, I don't know, something, making runes. So let's go over what I got. First one was, it kind of felt like most of my kingdom wanted to just go orc general, so I thought to myself, why not just let people pick whatever they want, and I'll just manage it. Most of the stuff I saw people talking about didn't seem that bad, so I wasn't too worried. And, maybe I get TMs, maybe I don't, maybe it's awful, but I wasn't too worried. And that was actually a pretty highly voted setup. My setup number 2 was basically okay. Just pick your orc generals. They're obviously very good. Max out that doctrine. And then pick one of the other 2 good attacking doctrines of either avian or dwarf. And, make them hit hard so you don't even have to really worry about offense ever. And then my thought was, okay, you get your elf mystics because they're just the best casters. They're fine attackers. They can be defensive. You don't need them to be pure TMs. You get a bunch of doctrine out of both elf and dark elf here, and you just chastity everyone with your elves. You fireball everyone with your dark elves. In an odd situation, you might need to nightmare a little bit and get all your gens out, and everything's hunky-dory. This is very close to what your average Emeriti setup looks like these days. So I thought that would work just fine. And I quite liked the idea initially of Dark Elves sort of as a pretty good ball of fireball power. Because my thought is if, someone's going to get Night Striked, it's the orcs. You don't have to worry too much about the Dark Elf penalty. The reason why I soured a little bit on Dark Elf is that they lost 20% of their instant damage when finals came out. But Elf remained pretty great. And, this was just about all you wanted. Setup 3, I thought would be fun to actually do sort of a meme 25 attacker age. Other personalities were open, but, if we honestly just think orc general's the best, why not just pick 25 orc generals and see what the hell happens? And, people weren't that into this one, but yeah, it had a little bit of love. Like, okay, that's fun. And then here I had a setup that was specifically built around having no provinces that would be easy to cast on. This is to sort of win the Landlust war, because if you think orcs are so good and you're going to be fighting orc on orc, what you can do here is maybe they outchain you a little bit, but you will always get to Landlust them one way and they can't Landlust you back, would be very, I think, beneficial. And I believe that 611 setup is very similar to this. Not quite identical, but essentially what you have here is you run 6 pure or mostly pure halflings. This adds just a ton of, thief damage you can stack up and quickly eliminate top offenses. Your Orc Necros, the ones that aren't chained, are able to fireball other core super easily. You get a one-way peasant advantage, and you then follow up with, you've got a little bit of Nightmare from both the core and the elf if things are a little difficult. And you just, you cover everyone with spells. You Night Strike, you play pretty normal. And, all of this seemed good, but this got kicked in the butt pretty big time. Heretic lost, it lost 10% damage on ops and spells. It got a little bit worse on the pre-stealth, but mostly Halfling is what annoyed me. They lost their 15% thief damage, which was going to be sort of how I'm like, okay, let's pick Halflings and beat bad guys, right? That was the thought here, and this had a lot of stuff going for it, I thought. Early on, Necro's military efficiency is pretty strong. Later age, okay, General's going to out-science you on off and def. But you're just going to scale solely with WPA in that way. And I think the kill stacking of Orc combined with Necro is actually really good. My setup where I say, hey, what if we actually run a TM wall? So you actually run fairies and halflings as pure TMs. And then you run a couple of hybrid elves to get your main casting done. But you have 8 provinces that can focus pretty hard on Night Strike. And just run your very standard Orc generals, and you have a lot of night power and get your gens off. And I thought this was probably the most reliable setup, but nobody was interested in that. I think everybody just said, okay, TMs are going to get pooped on a bit. And Fairy having both access to science and Heretic scaling with science better than anything else is a very strong buff. Halfling Rogue has a lot of defense, and you just run like 5 TPA and 25 EPA. You don't get hit, and you just Night Strike the shit out of the core. You can just train thieves if you need to take out TMs yourself later, but it's probably just not a problem. And then the most fun setup that we were pretty close to running was the all Heretic setup. So Havoc is a really strong ritual right now. No one really talks about it, but the buffs it got last age are just pretty bonkers. It's offensive and defensive WPA. It's a lot more instant damage than it used to be. Heretic has really high instant, not instant damage, but offensive TPA WPA. So you would have built-in almost 2x WPA TPA. Built-in minus losses and all this stacking op damage, and you scale with science, and you just would wreck people, in my opinion. You're looking at 150% instant damage, extra stealth, extra mana, and upwards of 200% plus TPA WPA. You can't get ET'd, so 100% of that stealth is being used. And you can get near max finesse super easily. She isn't actually that interesting on Heretic, but it is what it is. And back when Arcana Science was implemented, you were going to get that plus damage to both thieves and spells. I just think this would be fun. The biggest problem you would have here is a huge lack of runes. So even though you've got 25 heretics, you gotta run 35% towers probably to use it. You're still gonna get robbed backwards because you don't have a ton of defensive TPA. So this has some problems where the rune benefits aren't really there, and I kind of slipped in some cheeky dwarves hoping to counter that. You can push production science really hard and stuff like that. You'll definitely rob a lot of the enemies. So those were the setups I looked at for Age 116. and I was pretty happy with this list. I had no idea what I was going to pick. You'll notice none of these are sages. I didn't really look into sage very much until after I had distributed this list. Made my little science tool. I probably can't easily demonstrate right now. Maybe I'll make another video on that. Which essentially told me that sages are going to get 2 times the books. So I did some math with, okay, what am I looking at if I've got double books? What kind of effects can I get? And I was pretty happy with the options I got as sage. I think they'll come online early enough that we can make a proper, competitive kingdom after a few wars. And the real reason I ended up picking sage after finals came out is that so many instances of op damage got removed that I sort of needed a new solution to orcs, and somehow I landed on sage. Don't ask me why, but that's what we got going on. And my setup is pure sage, or just mostly sage. I like the orc sage. I think it's gonna be fun, so we'll see what happens. So those are the setups I have. You'll see this is something I do basically every age. I don't know which age these are, but this right here is the almost exact setup I ran last age. We honor crowned, and the idea was simple. Fairy Rogues has the most defense, and you just Night Strike people until you win. Orc Tactician's very strong. Human Paladin was very strong. I ended up splitting this with a few Avian Warriors to triple dip the Doctrines. The idea was, okay, we get the offense from orcs, we get the science effects from humans. The science effect from human is really focused there to stack the Fairy Rogues up. I didn't even realize how strong Human Paladin was going to be on its own. Then, other things I looked at last age, rather than, having orcs and Avian Warriors, you play into that Paladin defense we had last age. And because you lack a little bit of offense, you slip in some cheeky dwarf necros that can Night Strike, and you're still just focusing on that fairy to win age. But you're a little bit less scary. Maybe you get an extra war, and that helps you scale. Another setup I looked up last age. This was again focusing on maxing Doctrines, but with 25 attackers and a lot of Nightmare going on. I thought this was probably the best setup type to run last age, but relying on Nightmare, or at least hoping to rely on Nightmare while attacking with 25 people, it's just brutal, because I'm never synced up. I've got generals all over the place, and the Nightmare really breaks down if you don't have synced armies. And this was a setup where, same idea, we get the human, orc, Doctrines that were the best, and then rather than getting that sort of hybrid Nightmare situation, you just then add in the dead. That's a pretty good slate of Doctrines. Cheeky solo Fairy Mystic, shout out to Hidden for that gameplay. And as it says here, just beat the shit out of people. Right? So I think I've done this other times, right? Age this was. Definitely didn't pick either of these setups, the age this is referring to. This is me trying to figure out how to run science a long time ago. These are science numbers from, probably 3 years ago when I put this together based on a couple ages of data. This was made with real data. I got boring things like a little dragon calculator. And I've got just a buttload of science sheets where I look at every sort of option I can figure out with science. This was me evaluating individual picks. This was before Gilla 8888 made his simulator. Now I use that for everything, so definitely check that out. He is the best. Lots more science sheets. You know, all standard stuff, I think. I assume most people that have kingdoms do stuff like this. I don't know, though. Just weird. Sort of remember Sage. I end up picking. I think we ended up with this one. Oh yeah, this was the age where we built the maxed resilience humans. That was pretty fun. I don't remember if we actually ended up with warriors. These might have ended up as artisans. Something that. Yeah. So that was mostly to focus on my Age 116 setup options, how I thought about them, and what else did I want to do in this video? I wanted to talk about survey a bit to see what we're dealing with. Actually, one of the other setups that didn't make it to that list was a reject setup where everybody waited until just before the age opened, and then we were only allowed to pick picks that had under 5 people playing them, and people were actually pretty gung-ho for that, so that's fun. So what do we got going on? Obviously, we have a ton of humans and orcs. I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm actually surprised how many humans there are, but with not that many of them playing War Hero, I mean, it is the most picked human, tied with Sage, but I actually thought that War Hero was pretty much the best human by a mile. So I'm a little bit surprised people weren't picking it. It's just so much offense. Like, it really helps everything about human. The problem with War Hero is the science scaling is not there. And if you're not warring a lot and you're not sort of managing your honor correctly, it does fall off relative to other picks pretty hard due to the science. Whereas General is going to scale like a lot as the age, because the credits are going to get more and more, and 2-for-1 credits for elites is actually not a problem a lot of the time. And the offense is good. The extra General is devastating when you use it. The science benefits, there's a lot going for warriors. No surprise, it's the most picked personality by over 50%, followed by Sage. So, and it's mostly human sages. That's something I don't really understand, because the human doesn't actually stack with Sage at all in any way I can think of. So, I mean, it's just got a big military, I guess, is the reason. Big numbers makes for good sages usually, but why not just pick dwarf or elf or halfling? And there are a few of those, and one fairy sage. So huge orc population, definitely a lot of generals. It's going to be really hard to counter those. You want to opt them if you can, but if you're just in a battle of core versus core, if you can get into a spot where they can't hit you, with all their generals, or even more than 2 or 3 generals, that's going to be pretty good for you. But they just have a lot of offense and kills, so it's going to be tough to try and do that. Trying to mitigate with guard stations isn't great. It's an option, but you can be raised and they can just hit your guard stations a lot of the time. At least in war. Out of war, it's a little different. Yeah. gonna be tough. The way I would look at trying to counter Orc General otherwise would be speed. So Tacticians and Gains, I think, is really strong this age. Avian is perfectly good this age. The fact that there's less than 10 Avian Warriors is baffling. If any doctrine should be prioritized this age, I think it should be Avian Doctrine. You want Avian Doctrine, you want barracks, and you want to be able to build, hospitals and kill the enemy that way. Dark Elf, doesn't surprise me, there's not many of them. Their military's pretty decent, but they're just super vulnerable. And, you're kind of looking at them as a way to counter Orc. The thing is that a 0 Peasant Orc is still going to beat you before it sort of matters. Dryad, no one picked Dryad. I think they had a place, but this doesn't surprise me. Dwarf, everyone just picked Dwarf Sage. I think Dwarf Warrior is a perfectly good pick. I think Dwarf Tactician's fine. Dwarf General was something I was looking at, so it is what it is. Mostly people picked it with Sage and Artisan, no surprises. Elf, of course, very concentrated on Mystic with a few Necromancers and Heretics. I think Elf Rogue is perfectly fine, both as a hybrid and can almost flirt with Pure. You can't actually go Pure, but picking a Rogue that has 40% WPA built in is just really good. I think an Elf Rogue hybrid is probably better than a lot of Halfling hybrids out there. So something I think missed out on. Elf Sage is probably really good for scaling honor and science and defense into the age. Pretty low picks on Fairy. I think Fairy was the best, pure TM attempt. And there is a few Mystics there, but you look at this and there's basically no pure Mystics on the whole server. I think everyone's resigned themselves to playing hybrid elves. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe people do try to just pick those as pures. Buttload of Halfling Rogues, nothing wrong with that, no surprises. One of the things I like to tell people if they're struggling with a setup is pick the race with the best TPA and make it a Rogue, pick the race with the best WPA and make it a Mystic, and then pick the core with the most offense and make it a Warrior, and you're just going to do everything well. So, triple digits on Halfling, one of the only triple digit picks, actually the only triple digit pick other than Orc General, doesn't surprise me at all. Going to be strong, but they'll be pretty easy to cast on even with hybrids. But yeah, they have a lot of defense potential. 12.5 pop plus 13 elite plus Tree of Gold, like they're gonna do just fine. My suggestion to most people is don't train more TPA than you actually need. It's better to have defense than it is TPA a lot of the time. And if you get hit, your TPA goes up anyways. Humans, we talked about a little bit already. Orcs, I think Orc Tactician is probably a really good pick. I think Orc Tactician plus Avian Warrior was my favorite setup. Did that make my list? I don't even think that made my list, but it should have. It was the other thing I was thinking about is how to actually counter the meta is 2 high offense cores that just outpace people by a good 30 to 40%. So I'll have more than enough offense to triple or quad orcs, I think. So a little bit of a missed opportunity for people there. A little confused at the Orc War Hero. I guess you get a little bit of speed, a little bit of gain. It's actually pretty strong. It feels like you should be picking that with the O-specs in mind, but no big deal. And then there's a modest amount of Undead. General, I think, is probably the right pick for Undead, just because Undead O-specs really suck, so you really want a way to make elites if you can. And like two soldier or 2 credits making an 18-point elite is better than 2 credits making 2 O-specs. So Undead General makes a lot of sense to me. Anyways, I don't think there's anything too surprising. I think maybe there's more humans than I expected, and I'm a little confused at how many human generals there are, but other than that, I also think that there could be more clerics and artisans, but I guess they just get overshadowed. So, hope everyone has a fun age. I might do a video talking about my war, and maybe a video talking about all my wars. Might go over my science simulator I built, and maybe go into the ways that I pick science setups, stuff like that. So, thanks for listening. Short video. I hope to make a few videos like this as the age goes on. Thanks for watching. I'm Smiles. Goodbye.